There is a Solution for That is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-base development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit VARCsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of There's a Solution for That. As always, we've got just interesting topics. Hopefully, you're enjoying them as we go. But we've got a great guest on the program today, Ray Bicken at Chorus Consulting, and we are going to be talking about the challenges with onboarding and offboarding employees, but not what I would call the typical HR related issues or challenges. It's more of like the IP or intellectual theft potential problems that come with onboarding and offboarding. And Ray and Chorus, they've got a lot of expertise. Not just in that process, but just with intellectual theft, and so he can explain more about what he does, but
Sure.
That's going to be the topic today. So Ray, thanks for coming on the show.
All right, cool. I guess I'll start with just a little bit of background about who Chorus is,
Yeah.
because that'll give you kind of an idea of how things evolved. We're a little over 20-year-old company. Our CEO, John Myers, has been really in the computer forensics and cyber and data world since the early 1980s. So the very early stages of when things started changing from paper docs to actual computers and that sort of thing. So
When things were simple.
yeah, things were simple. So he started like computer forensics in a number of the big guys. Back Arthur Anderson, he worked for Deloitte, and then he worked for FTI Consulting, and then he's like, man, I keep doing this for the big guys. Why don't I start my own? And that's what happened. So in 2003, Chorus Consulting was born. So 21-ish and some change years old. And a lot of our processes, a lot of our procedures, and a lot of our business lines, if you will, have evolved over time just based on what's going out and how can we solve a problem that's going on in the business world. So we do a lot with attorneys in the e-discovery space. We do a lot of data collection from a lot of different types of data and making sense of data in regards to litigation and lawsuits and that sort of thing. We're not going to talk a lot about that today, but that's kind of where we got our start. So one of our really good law firm clients had a customer that was just having some problems being sued because intellectual property was leaking from their company and ended up at another company, or they have a employee come on board and inadvertently carry some information from their previous company that shouldn't have been there, and it costs them in lawsuits and that sort of thing. So we had a process called onboarding and offboarding that we've kind of converted into a service that we do with 5, 6 different companies now that are using us for that particular service. So I guess that's probably what we'll dive into mostly today, is what you and I talked about.
Yeah, that's perfect. And one of the things that I think is interesting about what you guys do, and also why I wanted to have you on the show, is because you guys do have that expertise in that intellectual property space and theft mitigation, remediation, all that stuff. And there's
Right.
not there, quite frankly, there's not too many people that I know that also would have the skill slash ability slash whatever to actually go into a court of law and represent a client, that has hired you guys to help with that. So I know you guys do some pretty cool stuff there on that forensic side. But even more importantly than that, just like we talked about with cybersecurity, just like we talked about with a lot of things, recovering in the aftermath of something is one thing.
Right.
We always think cybersecurity as an example is super, super important after we've been hacked, right?
Sure,
we
sure.
we think life insurance is important after we pass away, right? But
Right.
it's some of those things that we really have to be proactive about. And so that's where I think what led to this conversation is because the goal is to protect the IP before it gets stolen and to protect
Right.
people from getting into those situations like you talked about with your client. So that's the context for this conversation. Let's do this. I mean, just taking a 30,000-foot view though, I want to make sure that our audience understands like what we're talking about here. So when you talk about theft, okay, or intellectual property theft, or those types of things that can cause a lawsuit or cause someone to get need to sue someone, what are those types of theft categories, if you will, that you guys see and deal with?
Let's say you're dealing with, I'm a sales guy, right? I'm a business developer. So that's my specialty. Let's say you've got a business development team and there is an internal list or client resource management tool or something that you have where you keep track of who your good clients are and how much business they've done and who the key players and all that sort of information. And it's intellectual property to your organization. Well, a sales guy can go in and say, I'm being wooed by one of our competitors, and they're offering me X amount more on my base salary and 2% more on my commission rate. And but I don't want to start over from scratch, so I'm going to download all my client information from from my current company and take it with me. So they'll put a flash drive in their computer and copy everything over. They'll take everything from the CRM and pull it down to an Excel spreadsheet and then copy it over or email it to themselves on a private on their own personal email address and that sort of thing. So that's kind of one instance where someone might take some information, take it over to one of your competitors, and really it's most likely against their agreement, their employment agreement that they signed, and it really it's theft.
Right.
No, they didn't go take money out of your wallet, but they are taking money out of your wallet because they're stealing customers, if
Right.
that makes sense.
It does.
In a nefarious manner. Um, so you have another employee that it might not even be theft; it might be inadvertent. They're working for, oh gosh, an insurance company, and then they end up going to another insurance company and working over there. Well, they had personal devices they were using in both places. Maybe they didn't even know it. It wasn't really theft, it was inadvertent, but you still have intellectual property that'll end up in the wrong hands and can cause a lawsuit and that sort of thing.
So would an example of that be like, okay, I've got my cell phone and I'm driving around, somebody calls me and now I've got that client contact information on my phone. I mean, is that maybe one of the less like I did this on purpose kind of scenarios where I happen to have client information on my phone? Would that be an example of that?
I guess that could be an example. A lot of that is also going to come into play of, are you being underhanded about it? I mean, having someone's phone number saved in your your phone, you're doing business. If it's a BYOD, bring your own device situation, well, you're gonna have work information on your phone. So that's more or less an agreement that you make on exit, which is kind of you're leading right into one of our processes, right?
Yeah.
What do we remediate for? What do we look at? Do we do an exit interview when someone is either resigning or quitting or
Okay.
being fired, right? So that'll
Yeah.
kind of be a part of that prevention. Hey, let me, you've got a BYOD, and most companies have an agreement in place to where when you are using your own device, well, it does become discoverable. Your company can look at it when you're leaving in order to kind of remediate personal or private company information.
Got it.
Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
It does, and I interrupted you when you were kind of going there, so I apologize. So so
That's
so
okay.
you might have CRM data, you might have other personal information on that. Are there other categories that you guys see when you tend to go to work for a client?
It will just depend on the level of the employee, how much information they were privy to. that sort of thing. One of our clients, some of them will remediate and do a process on all employees. Some of them say, yeah, let's just do it on C-level or director level and above type of employees. So it depends on the organization.
Okay.
Depends on what your position was in the company on what you're going to have access to. If you're
Okay.
getting access to stuff that you didn't even have the permission to access as an employee, well, then that's goes into the theft category, I would
Got
imagine.
it. I
Yeah.
guess, like when I think of, the kind of theft you might see in the movies, it's like, okay, I'm a defense contractor, and I've developed this fancy new, defense weapon, what have you, and right, and there's blueprints, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's
Right.
blueprints, there's schematics, there's assembly instructions. So, I mean, I imagine all of those things are potential, depending on what type of company we're talking about as well. So,
Right.
so let's dive into it. So part of, again, and what you guys talked about more so than maybe other companies that I've ran into, is being purposeful about how you onboard, and then also being purposeful on how you offboard. So tell us a little bit more about how that impacts, a client's ability to protect their IP.
Right. Well, intellectual property litigation can get very, very expensive, especially if you're dealing with two very large organizations and big numbers are involved, right? So, case in point, company A has an employee that they've hired away from company B. The employee brings over their personal devices, uses a company laptop, plugs in their personal devices to that laptop. Some of that information that is on their personal device ends up in the company's network or system, what have you. Well, now, and this was a real case scenario, now this company has information from another organization that they're not supposed to have, right? So how do you mitigate that? Before the employee comes in and before they're actually putting any device and hooking any device or using using the Wi-Fi at the office to hook their phone up, because you're exposing at that point, before any of that happens, there's the onboarding process of looking at that cell phone and working with HR and IT and getting inside that phone and mitigating and pulling any information that's not supposed to be there off of that device. All of our project managers are licensed private investigators and will document everything they do so that if anything were to ever happen down the road, they will have the third party proof of here's what we did, the information that your former employee brought over to our company was mitigated before their start date with a third party. We never saw that information. Here's exactly what happened. We can testify in hearings in court down the road as to what we did. And yes, the new company never saw any of that private information because it was remediated before the device went live online. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So that's the onboarding. And then when someone is leaving, do the exact same thing. If they plugged in a tablet, used a cell phone, and there might be information, they had a personal laptop, they did email themselves to their personal account every once in a while. We can look at all those things, remediate that information, pull it out. You have a third party that did it, and it's been documented. We will testify in hearings in court down the road as to all the processes. And the companies we are doing it for feel like it's good insurance. You brought up insurance earlier, right? Because
Yeah,
yeah, you don't want to pay for car insurance, right? And you hope you never use it in your entire life. And it's an
exactly.
expense that's on your personal P&L or your business P&L, and you hope you never have to use it. But you get into a really bad wreck and you hurt somebody. Do you have the 1.5 million laying around to go pay them? You probably don't.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, some of the things that you're talking about really lead to some questions in my mind. And so one of the questions that I've got is so you're a contracted service for for a company, right? And so you're effectively a third party provider of this service. And I'm
Right.
wondering how important that is because you know to me it's like if somebody walks into my company and I'm the one doing the quote unquote onboarding and I'm the one checking the phone and the devices or doing all those, even if I was to do everything you were doing, I've still seen it because I'm the one doing
Right.
it. Right.
Right.
So is that a component like not just a value add to what you guys do, but a critical component when it comes to the whole litigation support?
If if the issue was to ever get into the court system, yeah, it can become an issue. I had a client call me probably about 2 weeks ago and says, Ray, we have an employee that left. We think they might have taken some stuff with them. We're not 100% sure, but we want to collect their old laptop, and we want to collect their cell phone and kind of look through it. Our IT department just wants to do it themselves. Me being the paralegal and trying to talk our general counsel into no, let's use a third party for this so that if something happens down the road, it can't be we used our own person to do the data collection. We used a third party, and this third party is willing to document, willing to testify. And so that does come into play. What percentage of the time does that come into play? Is most of the time what the IT side does and what the paralegal and the GC do, is it going to work out okay? Yeah, most likely. But in the event that it blows up in your face, it's nice to have a third party to get it done.
That's cool. I mean, like quite frankly, everything I know about law came from watching Suits. Okay, so
Right.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on that show, but I've learned, okay, you got to check all your boxes. Um, yeah, well, it just like if you were to take a box of confidential information and take it to a shredder, you saying that you shredded it is one thing, but having a certificate from a shredding company that you shredded
Yep.
this thing, it's just a different thing, right? It's more valid. It's third party
Yep.
proof, which if you will. So I can really see how yeah, it hopefully it won't matter, but if it does, you've checked the boxes and you're not spending all this time and energy and then having something slip through the courts and not be defensible because you didn't do this one little thing that, oh, by the way, you probably should have, right? So
Right.
I can totally get that. Um, the other question that I've got in my head is, gosh, this sounds incredibly disruptive. This sounds like it really would delay the process. I mean, like if I hired somebody today, I want them to start, right? I want them to get on board and let's get going, even if it's, oh, start in 2 weeks. I mean, when they show up in the door, I want them to get going. And so talk about that part in terms of the process, like timing wise. Does this delay onboarding, the real onboarding into a company, or is it just like be happening behind the scenes? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it doesn't really take that long. It's not a huge, lengthy process. So it won't delay long, and a lot of it can be done in the background. Some of it can be done without the employee even knowing, right? So um obviously they're going to know that you're going to image their devices and that sort of thing, but that process takes as long as it takes, depending on how much data is on the computer or the cell phone or the tablet or whatever device or whatever personal email that you're going to capture and that sort of thing. It's really not a long, huge process. We're talking hours, not days.
Okay.
So there are times where we get a cell phone that's so chock full of data that you plug it in at 9 a.m. to collect everything from it. And it's not done till 7, 8 p.m. It could be a 10, 12-hour process to get the data collected. Then the device goes back to the owner and you do the remediation without interruption after that. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
No, that does.
So
And
we're
I'm
not
glad.
talking weeks and weeks. We're
Perfect.
talking um, days, less than days, but most of the time hours.
Perfect. And that was my concern. Is like if I mean, if it's happening same day or near same day, okay, that's probably not that big a deal. But if you're like having to ship a phone off and you know, yeah, or a personal
Yeah.
device of an employee off, and you're going to get it back in a week, I'd imagine that'd be a really bad way to start.
Yeah, it could be. Now, don't get me to lying, because there are times where there's going to be the anomaly, right? Next time you give me something, it's probably going to take me 3 days when I told you days or hours, right? But there are
Well,
exceptions to that rule.
well,
So,
I won't hold it. I won't hold you to it in a court of law. um, but so here, and again, so let's take a real case scenario. You've just hired me. I'm walking in the door. I might not have even told you that I had a personal phone that I plan to use or something like that, or maybe who knows who knows what I was told or wasn't told during the interviewing process. And now I show up. I've got a phone with me. What does that process look like? I mean, are you guys working on site, or is there like a cloud process? It's like connect your thing and we'll remote into it. Like, I mean, just how does that work? Or do they
the,
literally have to ship the phone off and courier it? I mean, how does that work?
I mean, there are instances where the phone would need to be shipped, but 90+% of the time, everything's done remotely. You're working with the IT department and HR or the legal department, whoever you're working with at that point to give you access, and you're doing the remediation remotely. So sometimes we might have to ship a kit that you plug in, and then you can do the remediation, that sort of thing. But remote's key.
Okay.
Used to years ago, you'd have to fly a lot more, fly and have hotel expenses and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or FedEx expenses and that sort of thing. But most of the time, it's pretty remote.
Okay. And I imagine you got to have somebody sign something when they walk in the door that we're going to do this. You're giving us approval to do this, all those
Right.
types of things, right?
Right. And the companies we're working with, when this kind of service was born, if you will, over time they've put processes in place. So someone bringing a surprise phone is probably not going to happen with the people that have been doing this for a long time because there's a process in place and they ask those questions coming in.
Okay, got it. And let's talk a little bit more on the outboarding process, because so again, just thinking with kind of my HR hat, right? Either somebody has put in a resignation notice, and maybe it's that same day, or maybe it's 1 or 2 weeks out. So we might have some time here. We've got the other scenario where maybe somebody's employment's been terminated, and that's 3 p.m. and we're walking them out the door at 3:01. That does happen. That's a reality of
Sure, it
business. It's
is.
something we all deal with. So how does that service that you provide take into consideration those both of those scenarios?
Well, if it's if it's a personal device, most organizations have things written into their employment agreements that since you're using your personal device and you're using it for business purposes, your employer will retain the right to look through that data. And if you leave with it and you refuse, man, sometimes legal might have to get involved. There might have to be a subpoena. There might have to be some things like that going on. Most of the time, it's not real adverse. If it's adverse, they probably did something wrong.
Probably so.
And you can probably know that they're going to try to go delete some things. They're going to try to cover their tracks and that sort of thing. And most of that's discoverable too in a computer forensics tool. You're going to be able to find out, oh gosh, they were deleting a bunch of data. They plugged in a flash drive to this device at this time, and data was ported over. Oh gosh, there's a bunch of emails from our server to a personal account, and these attachments are proprietary information. All that's going to be, you're going to be able to find it doing a search and doing an investigation.
Very cool. I mean, obviously you got to have some really really smart folks over there,
Yeah.
because that
Well,
that
here's
it
my
it
disclaimer.
doesn't sound easy.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. I am on the business development side, and I've been doing this since 1994. I'm not the one actually back in the back end doing the investigations, that sort of thing. Our PIs, project managers, are the ones doing that. So I have to speak at a level that once you start getting into bits and bytes and exactly how they're doing the investigations, I'm not your guy. I'd have to get some of my experts on. I get to
Well,
be the face, if that makes
abs
sense. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, that's great, and appreciate the context too, because I mean, again, you've got some really really smart folks on your team that are probably doing really really incredibly good work. Um, So tell me a little bit more about like policies. So you've mentioned a few times you might have a bring your own device policy. I know that like some of the other kind of topics we've been chatting about internally are like an acceptable AI use policy. There's all sorts of things that we need to be thinking about these days that, quite frankly, we probably didn't need to think about 20 years ago, but here we are. So do you guys advise clients on some of those specific policies that they need to have in place, or is that more talk to your attorney, talk to your HR? What do you what part do you play in that, if any?
Yeah, probably not a whole lot on that policy side. That is going to be more of you need to get HR and legal on the same page. Again, much like you and I, when our relationship started, it was there might be some synergies here. I'm not an accountant. I don't know QuickBooks like you guys do. You're not a forensic or cyber expert. So we don't do accounting investigations. We do the forensic investigation. And if an accountant is needed, I'm going to reach out to you and, try to find one of your kind of experts or what have you. Might reach out to someone that I've used in the past from an accounting standpoint. So I don't want to give legal advice or accounting advice. So the
Mhm.
policy part is going to be more of we can tell them, hey, look, you just need to have a policy. We're not the policy provider,
Yeah.
but you need to have a policy in place for this type of stuff.
Well, yeah, and that's actually the root of the question because it's impossible to know everything. It's impossible to know what you don't know, and so even just that by being able to say, "Hey, company, in order to protect you now and in the future, here's some things that we've seen with our existing clients that are really really crucial to that." And if
Right.
that's a bring your own device policy, great. Hey, you should talk to your attorney about that, right? And so at least that gives me a box to check and go talk with somebody about. So
Yeah.
beyond that, beyond the bring your own device, are there any other ones just this top level that you can recall that might be important for folks to go, oh, let me go talk to my attorney about some of these things?
Man, any kind of uh internal investigation, we do a lot of um let's say you got a whistleblower type stuff, you need to
Yeah.
investigate an employee, that kind of stuff happens. I'm talking about reactionary stuff as opposed to, proactive stuff that we'll get involved in and go do data collections on, that sort of thing. But that's more of a lot of time falls in the compliance and business ethics programs that companies have going on. um we do a lot of, man, just things that are going on internally within an organization to try to mitigate risk,
Okay.
all that stuff. But a
Well,
lot of our stuff is reactionary and it won't become proactive until they've had an issue, much like the insurance conversation we had.
yeah, I'm sure that's pretty typical. So like I know one of the words that I've seen you use is incident response.
Yeah.
So like what is it, so we've talked about being proactive with onboarding and offboarding and actually having a system and a process methodically carried out, right? But what does an incident response look like when someone calls you and says, I think
Yeah.
someone stole?
That's more on our IT side. And I don't want to get too deep into it as the sales guy, because when I get these questions, I know the expert that I need to bring in. So an incident, man, something happens. Man, we just got hacked. Someone sent one of those emails, someone clicked on a link, and now we've got a virus in our system. So we have a team that can go out and investigate how that happened, try to get some preventative measures put in place so that it doesn't happen down the road. We do quite a bit of that type stuff on the response side. So an
Okay.
incident, man, a virus, one of those people that try to, steal your company information via an email, or they have a I don't know, just all kinds of nefarious things that are going on in the cyber world. We can investigate what happened, how to prevent it in the future.
Okay, so you guys truly are providing that forensic role, not necessarily within the bookkeeping or accounting, but
Yeah.
just more like company wide, technology wise, network wise,
Right.
device wise, like what happened, when did it happen, how it happened, or who did it. It's really really cool. I mean, like I know there was at one point in my prior history in my career, getting to where I am now, I remember that there was an e-commerce website that got hacked. Nobody knew it got hacked, right? But it was, sitting on the server where credit card charges were getting processed and credit cards were getting processed. And that kind of stuff was happening behind the scenes until it got discovered, right? But that's when you go in and go, okay, what happened? Where did it come from? How long has it been there? Right? What's our risk? What's our potential liability here? And then
Right.
go from there. But us IT wannabes can go only go so far, looking around, right? But I mean, it sounds like you guys have the really the truly forensic folks that can figure it out.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And are we 100%? Nope. No one's ever going to be 100% successful at anything. I was reading something on X today that SpaceX just got hit today. They were
Mm.
breached today. And Elon came out and said he thinks it's something from a foreign government. Somebody
Mm.
got into SpaceX. Everybody is vulnerable. It can
Wow.
happen.
Well, are you seeing, just in terms of trends, are you guys seeing especially in the space that you guys live in every day, are you seeing this as an increasing trend, or more just like one that's already been there? I mean, just like what are you seeing industry wide?
I think it's pretty steady. You're going to have nefarious actors out there doing things. I don't know if it's happening more today than it did 5 years ago, but it's happening just as much. It's not less. I know that for sure.
Right. Well, I know like with cybersecurity, that's definitely on the rise, and it's been on the rise,
Yeah.
and it's going to keep rising because,
Yeah.
especially now, people are probably have been and are increasingly using AI to do not so great things. So,
Yeah. And the protection software out there is written to combat the things that have happened in the past, and they're trying to anticipate what people are going to do, but they can't anticipate a piece of code that someone's writing to try to bypass. I mean, so it's a battle. It's a constant war.
yeah, makes total sense. Well, as we get close to wrapping up this episode, I want to just
Yeah.
ask for your just candid thoughts. It's like if you met a business owner, at a Starbucks, right? Or you're hanging out
Yeah.
having a coffee, and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" My question would be, "Hey, what tips do you have?" It's like if I want to make sure that I'm protecting myself, at least at the basic level, what are maybe some of the just one or two tips that you would have for pretty much any company?
Yeah, I think number one is have policies and procedures when you are bringing on people and you are offboarding people, right? So have something in place. Have a prevention policy. Go ahead and spend a little time and money on double checking devices and things like that. A lot of this is going to depend on your organization, how big it is, how competitive the industry is, and how much risk is at stake and that sort of thing. But just have a plan is kind of, and then secondly, once an incident happens, this is a reactionary thing. An incident does happen, and the server or the device that is infected or has been affected, quarantine it right away. Don't keep using it. things can get overwritten, things can go right. You might not be able to find out the information you could have had you not kept using it, that sort of thing. So, a couple things, have a plan, put it in place. And if you do have something happen, quarantine as much as possible.
Okay. Great suggestions. Well,
Yeah.
Ray, I mean, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate you coming. And if someone wanted to reach out to you guys to either help build that plan or to
Yeah.
help implement any of those services that you're talking about, or heaven forbid, need to call you because they've just had a problem, they've just had a suspected theft, how do they get a hold of you guys
Yep.
for getting help in that?
Yeah, we are chorusconsulting.net. CHORUS consulting.net. And then my email address is rbeacon@chorusconsulting.net. I'll throw my cell phone, 832-472-0003. Call me direct anytime.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Ray. I really appreciate you being on
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And for everybody else that's listening, we honestly we hope you never, ever, ever have this problem. Okay. But that's what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about real world problems and solutions to those problems. So I really appreciate Ray and Chorus Consulting for what they're doing to solve that problem and or to hopefully more proactively solve that problem. So hopefully you got value out of this show, and we'll keep giving it every week. So
All
subscribe,
right.
like, all those kind of good things. So appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks.
There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/There's a Solution for That. Or visit varcsolutions.com/podcast, where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.